Welcome to the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Edufaith Essentials is an educational podcast that provides essential information, resources, and tips about education, leadership, and topics about diverse learners. Diverse learners include students with disabilities who receive services under Section 504 or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, response to intervention and the multi-tier system of support, English speakers of other languages, and related diverse learner categories. Edufaith Essentials' mission is to bring positive awareness and promote equity and inclusion in education by sharing information and topics about non-traditional learners. Edufaith Essentials' goal is to restore faith in education one student at a time by empowering listeners with knowledge, because we all know that knowledge is power, so let's be powerful. I am your host, Dr. Nakia, sending you good vibes and thanking you for joining me for another episode of the Edufaith Essentials podcast. Thank you for joining me for season 2 of Edufaith Essentials. Yes, it is now season 2. It has been a year since I've launched the Edufaith Essentials podcast. And I want to take this time to thank my listeners and my viewers for your support with me as I launched this podcast a year ago. As we shift into season 2, I'm going to focus more on content and truly creating that podcast mode. So some of the graphics will be slimmed down, but I want to take time to provide extensive research and provide that quality and quantity of podcast information versus the graphics. So I still have the graphics on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page and all the links and everything there, but I just want to let you know and explain the new format as I launch into season 2. You live and you learn. Now it's time for our Edufaith inspirational story. Today we're going to make a PAC. PAC stands for the Pasco Association for Challenged Kids. It was founded 26 years ago by founders Paula and Barry Cohen. They were motivated to start PAC to provide opportunities for families based on their experience with their son who has autism. PAC is a summer camp that offers a welcoming experience for families and children with special needs. PAC has been successful and continues to grow annually. All ages are welcome and encouraged to have some summer fun for a few weeks. Bravo to Paula and Barry for creating this opportunity for children and families in your community. And that is it for our Edufaith inspirational story. Now it's time for some essential news. July 24, 2023, the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Special Education Programs released updated guidance to ensure the rights and protections for children with disabilities and their families under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. Included is a Dear Colleague letter with information. Just want to provide a little background about a Dear Colleague letter. Dear Colleague letters are letters written by federal agencies to convey information. Dear Colleague letters usually are written concerning a bill or resolution, which generally includes a description of the legislation or the subject matter, along with reasons for support or opposition. The guidance is intended to provide states with information to exercise their responsibilities to ensure that all children with disabilities have available to them a free and appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services to meet their unique needs and prepare for future education, employment, and independent living, and that the rights of the children with disabilities and their parents are protected. The general supervision guidance in this document will address requirements related to state general supervision responsibilities, identification and correction of noncompliance, the IDEA State Performance Plan and Annual Performance Plan reports, state annual determinations, and state enforcement through determinations and other methods. Also, additionally included in the guidance, states are provided with information to support the implementation of a statewide comprehensive early intervention services for infants and toddlers with disabilities and their families. With the free and appropriate public education and access to foundational programs, this is hopeful that it would improve educational outcomes and results in functional outcomes for all children and to enhance the access to developmental opportunities for infants and toddlers with disabilities. On July 31st, the Office of Special Education Director Valerie C. Williams released the final blog in discipline discussions in the series. With the blog, there were 200 plus resources offered and 5 actions to reduce exclusionary discipline. The 5 actions include adopt a prevention mindset, examine data, create and support systems, implement evidence based practices, and access OSEP technical assistance resources. There were 200 plus resources offered in the final blog series. This is a conclusion to the Discipline blog series that was previously released during the summer. The purpose of the blog series was to provide actionable resources for educators, families, early childhood programs, and administrators at the state and local levels with resources and information to reduce exclusionary discipline. On August 14th, the U.S. Department of Education Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services released a new blog series to emphasize the need for a cohesive secondary transition planning for students with disabilities. The new blog series will focus on transition planning for students, youth, and young adults with decision-making regarding post-secondary education, employment, and more. Earlier this year, Expect, Engage, and Empower was released through the U.S. Department of Education. This initiative focuses on effective transition planning to help young adults moving from school to post-secondary education, community, or competitive integrated employment. The goal of this blog series is to strengthen current transition planning and experiences for students with disabilities. The department has previously supported post-secondary transition planning through funding the National Technical Assistance Center on Transition and reissuing a transition guide to post-secondary education and employment for students and youth with disabilities back in 2020. On July 9th, 290 advocates joined together to press Congress on education, funding, educator shortages, and school mental health. Advocates from 46 states gathered together for the 2023 Special Education Legislative Summit. During the dates of July 9th through 12th, the two-day event was hosted by the Council for Exceptional Children and CASE. They focused on those vital issues and culminated with exciting visits to legislators on Capitol Hill. The links to all of these stories will be posted on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page, and that will do it for our essential news. Now we're going to shift to our essential knowledge and essential tips. Today, we're going to actually combine the essential knowledge and tips because today we're going to be talking about back to school transitions. And in this episode, I'm going to provide essential knowledge and tips for parents, teachers, and leaders as we transition back to school. Transitioning back to school can be a significant challenge or a welcome addition in the lives of parents and children with disabilities and diverse learners. To help prepare and support your child for the upcoming school year, here are some essential tips from me that I've actually tried and worked with parents with, and then actually researched for back to school. Parents, the first thing I want to encourage you to do is communicate with the school. Reach out to your child's teacher, special education coordinator, administrator to discuss your child's needs, strengths, and challenges. You are your child's first teacher, so it's important that you provide teachers with that vital information once you have the opportunity to provide any relevant information about your child's progress, growth, or any happenings that happened over the summer, any changes in therapy, medication, or any updates that will impact their school experience. So school, because that is so important. As you get ready to get into the routine to go into back to school time, it is really important and valuable that you create a daily schedule or a consistent routine that mimics the school schedule as closely as possible. You want to prepare your child and start working through those bedtime routines and meal times and setting up that designated homework or study space. You want to gradually adjust your child's sleep schedule so when the first day of school arrives, it's not a shock. Of course, we're all excited for back to school, so we all have those butterflies the night before school starts, but you want to make sure that you start aligning and setting those bedtime hours where your child is getting enough rest so they can be successful in school. Start having those visual supports or those social stories to help get your child into the changes in their daily routine and preparation to what they expect when they're at school. If possible, If you can make this happen, it would be great for you to visit the school together, walk through the classrooms, the playground, and then introduce your child to the teachers. And this can happen at meet and greet or whatever time. In the interim, what you might want to do as you're preparing, if you're not able to get access to the school, is go ahead and schedule some field trips. That's right. So you might want to drive by the school, practice walking to the bus stop, ride by the school and introduce the school to your child. Say, hey, you're going to be going here in a couple of weeks and you're going to spend some time with a wonderful teacher. And we're going to get excited about your new school year. And arrange a visit to the school before the first day to familiarize your child. That's great. But if you can't, then do some drive-bys, do some practice runs to get your child into the routine and the expectations of what's going to happen once they start school. Review some academic skills. So spend some time a couple of weeks before school focusing on those areas where your child may need an extra support and reinforcement. So that can go into the social stories, visual supports, and just the introductory part. As far as visual supports, that's where you're going to be going by the school and showing them schools, or at least using those social stories or the devices to kind of introduce school and readiness for them. Introduce academic language as well. That's very important because you're getting into the back to school time. Vocabulary words that are related to back to school, such as teacher, lunch, bus. If they're higher functioning, go ahead and have those school conversations about goals and who are the teachers that they know that's in the upcoming grade level, and just get them excited about school and lunchtime and meeting with their friends and going to specials and all those things. Reintroduce the academic language, have those field trips, review those academic skills, get your child aligned with the school hours so they can get ready for school. Work on self help skills. Encourage independence in daily tasks for your child, such as dressing, grooming, going to the restroom, and all those things is going to be essential for them as they get into the routine. Having them go to bed, having them get up at a certain time, having them get dressed, just practice makes perfect with those different things. In addition to that, you might want to look into practicing lunchtime with your child at home. So practicing opening the lunch containers, using school supplies, and those skills that promote self-sufficiency. So you're letting them know we're going back to school. This is going to be our routine. This is where you're going to go. Here's your routine. Here's where you're going to go. You're going to be on this playground at a certain time. You're going to be at this bus stop a certain time. You're going to be with your teacher. You're going to ride the bus. You're going to be at lunch. And then here's some things you're going to do when you're at school because you are growing and I'm proud of you and we're excited about school. The next tip is prepare for sensory needs. Consider your child's sensory preferences or if they have any sensory preferences or needs. And if they are sensitive to noise, have them practice wearing those noise canceling earphones for a couple of hours while they're at home. Or if they have any tactile sensitivities, gradually introduce the feel of school materials and things like that. Any type of sensory need your child has, you want to get them into the practice of using these resources again and being able to use those resources in school and practice using them, wear them so they're comfortable once they transition back into the back to school atmosphere. Collaborate with your professionals. The first thing I said was communicate with the school, but you also want to collaborate with your professionals. So if your child have any therapists or receive any support services, you want to make sure that you talk to them, get any tips to ensure a smooth transition back to school, and make sure you communicate that information with the teachers once the child begins school. Also, those social connections. So go ahead and arrange some play dates or some meetups, get introduced with some classmates and make those social connections and friendships. And then let them know once they get into school, they're going to make more friends in school. So they'll have those social connections and friendships and have that social learning aspect where they're more comfortable in school and they're familiar with people. There's no guarantee that they're going to be in their friends' classrooms, but it's always great to provide that social connection and friendships. So even if they're not in the same classroom, maybe they'll see that person at recess. So they're already acquainted with those classmates and those children who might be in their classrooms or in the same grade level. And encourage your child to talk about their feelings and their concerns as they talk through back to school. It's very important to provide that emotional support and let your child express their feelings if they're nervous, if they're excited, if they're anxious, and if they're nonverbal, make sure that they're using their resources or their devices to let you know how you're feeling so you can support them with that as well. And then create a communication plan. You want to establish a communication plan, introduce yourself to the teachers, and make sure that you have an open line of communication to provide that information and address concerns promptly. Communication is going to be the key for parents going back to school in all avenues, that making sure that you have that consistent schedule and getting those things into practice, and then making sure that you collaborate and foster those social connections and have your child communicate about how they're feeling as well. Once school begins and the doors open, if you go on to meet and greet, make sure that once again you establish the lines of communication with your child's teacher, the special education team, the specials teachers, whoever. You want to make sure that they understand your child's strengths and weaknesses. You may request a parent conference with the teachers, or you might even request an IEP or a 504 plan meeting in place for them as far as supports and provide any modifications needed for your child for them to be successful. A lot of times it's really good to go ahead and provide the information ahead of time. And then maybe a few weeks into school, you guys the team may sit down and have an IEP meeting or 504 plan meeting to address anything that might need to be addressed once the teachers have had a chance to meet your child and assess some of their needs. Set realistic expectations for your child. So understand that progress may be gradual, but you want to celebrate those small achievements and growth. You might set some goals for yourself as a parent. You might set some goals for your child academically and socially and emotionally, or you guys may all come together to determine some check marks of what you want to do. And based on these 3 weeks, I want to make this happen. And after 6 weeks of school, I want to make this happen. But I want you to be flexible and have a goal in mind for how you want your child to be successful throughout the year. Create a homework or study environment, but once school does start, make sure that you have this designated work or study environment that's free from distractions, and that your child knows when I come home from school, I'm going to have a snack, I'm going to play a little bit, and then at 6 o'clock every evening, we're going to sit down in the learning environment in the home, and we're going to work and we're going to read and do those things. As well, make sure that you have some sensory support for your child. I mentioned this already, but make sure that sensory support is at the school level, but then also at home. So you're mirroring what's happening in school with what's going to happen at home. Advocate for your child and attend any meetings. Make sure you attend any back to school meetings, open house, and things like that. And make sure that you don't hesitate to voice your concerns and insights in relation to your child. Positive reinforcement. As you set the goals for your child, develop a positive reinforcement system at home that you want to reinforce. Have those regular check-ins, schedule regular meetings with teachers and staff to assess your child's progress and address any concerns. Parent conference, but based on your child's need, it could be an IEP meeting or a 504 meeting. You just want to make sure that you're advocating and you're keeping those lines of communications open, and that you're being proactive as a parent. Network with other parents and families, and then make sure that you can network with other organizations as well, because they can offer their valuable insights and tips to support you. And then be flexible and practice self care. Back to school is overwhelming for families, and it's overwhelming for students, and it's overwhelming for teachers. It's a fun time of year, but it's busy for everyone. So you want to make sure that you prioritize your self care, and that you teach your child to prioritize their self care as well as we start this back to school transition. So those are just some recommendations for parents as we transition back to school. Remember that your child is unique, and that what may have worked this year may not work well as last year. The teachers change. So this teacher might be different than that teacher. So you want to be flexible. You want to communicate. You want to be open to communication. You want to advocate for your child. And then you want to make sure that you have those routines and practices in place consistently to help with the transition, a successful transition back to school from you, mom and dad and families, and your child. For educators, when you're working with students with disabilities and diverse learners as you get ready for your school year for educators, the first thing, educator, is get to know your students. Take time to learn your students, learn their names, and I know you will. But then once you get through the preliminary period of getting acclimated to the routines and structures, then you want to make sure that you identify your students' strengths, challenges, and preferences. Of course, the first part of the school year, you're going to be establishing those routines and procedures, because that's very important. So you're going to have your rules, you're going to have your consequences, you're going to have your practices in place for your classroom. But once you get those foundations down, get to know your students and understand the ways that you can tailor your teaching methods to better suit their needs. If you have students with disabilities or students with special needs in your classrooms, make sure that you're collaborating with the special education professionals, whether it's the district staff, the school staff. You want to work closely with special education teachers, therapists, and other related professionals to create a comprehensive plan that addresses each student's unique needs, which includes looking over that student's IEP and asking questions about the IEP or the 504 plan or whatever intervention plan that student may have in place. You want to make sure that you're collaborating with those experts and tap it into ways that you can support that student. Differentiated instruction is something that's best practices for all teachers. You want to differentiate your instruction. So once you get your universal design for learning set up, you want to make sure you take time that you differentiate your teaching methods and accommodate your various learning styles that your students may have within your classroom. You want to provide a mix of visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and hands-on activities to engage all students. And you're going to use those universal screeners or implement those universal learning design principles by providing those multiple means of representation for engagement, expression to support students and make instruction accessible to all students. Take the data, use the data, look at the IEP or the 504 plan, and then make some adjustments and ways that you're going to be able to support your students and providing those various methods of differentiated instruction, accommodation support, modification support, plan support, and implementing ways that you're going to meet the needs of all your learners. Scaffold learning. So break down those complex tasks into manageable parts and see if you can build upon your students' prior knowledge to help them build confidence as they progress through each step and ultimately complete a larger task. As you transition back to schools and you're getting to know your students, you're learning their needs, learning more about them, you want to make sure that you want to break down those complex tests and then build upon that prior learning. Another strategy or tip for teachers is use visual supports. I talked about this a little bit with those multiple modalities for learning, but visual supports such as charts, diagrams, and graphic organizers can help students with disabilities or diverse learners better understand and organize information. You can also use those visual supports as you get ready with your foundations at the beginning of the year with your rules and consequences and having those visual supports to help support with behavior management and transition and those things to help your classroom run smoothly. Speaking of supports and visual supports and rules and consequences, you want to make sure that you provide clear instructions, offer clear, concise instructions, and repeat them necessary. Make that a part of your educational and your teaching routine. You want to use simple language and not use those ambiguous or abstract terms. So provide clear, concise instructions, and then use visual supports to help support students so they can see the information, but they understand the information using terms that they're not familiar with. Because if they're unfamiliar with the words, they're not going to understand what you're saying and they're not going to follow your instructions. You want to make sure that you incorporate assistive technology. Use assistive technology or even technology tools to help support students with disabilities and diverse learners in your classroom. Text to speech software, speech recognition, and any type of thing that can help support those students who are diverse learners, help them connect with the context of your lesson and your instructions so they can meet their needs. And then you want to offer those flexible assessment methods. So we're teaching to assess, we're teaching to measure mastery, we're teaching to make sure that students can master the standards. But the only way to provide and pivot your instruction is to make sure that you have that assessment data to go back and help you determine whether you need to reteach or if the students are mastering the standards. So you want to make sure that you offer those flexible assessment methods for students in alternative forms such as projects, presentation, hands-on activities, and then your traditional paper and pencil tests, and then use technology. We're really pushing technology. There's a lot of technology resources out there to help teachers with assessments. So use all of those different methods to help alter your assessments and change your assessments where you have various forms to assess students' learning and target and plan your instruction. Make sure you have positive behavior support. So I mentioned the value of rules, consequences, and visual supports to help those rules and consequences. Make sure that you also have a positive support system and a positive supportive learning environment. You don't want to always focus on the negative. You don't want to always reinforce the negative behavior, but you want to push the positive behavior in your classroom. So you want to implement behavior management strategies that focus on positive reinforcement, those clear expectations, those consistent routines, and that you're rewarding those students who are following your rules and routines. As regular check-ins and feedback, you want to make sure that you have some way or method to provide regular check-in and feedback so you can answer questions, address concerns, and provide that personalized attention to help students stay on track, feel supported, reinforce positive behaviors. You want to encourage social activities in your classroom, which include peer support and collaboration, because students learn well when they're interacting with each other. And social skills are very important for students when they're in the classroom. So you want to pair students up and allow them to learn from each other and build upon each other's strengths and weaknesses and work with others so they can learn that every person is unique and that you have to support each other in the classroom because we're one classroom unit. You want to make sure that your students understand and teach them, especially students with disabilities, about their individual strengths and challenges and encourage them to advocate for their own needs. Now, of course, it's going to depend on age and ability for the students, but you still want to push that advocacy, even if it's encouraging a student who's nonverbal to use their device or a student who is verbal to advocate that they don't understand something. You want to empower them to speak up. You want to empower them to succeed both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, because when they go to the next grade, you are setting them up for success. That includes some culturally responsive teaching. You want to consider the cultural and linguistic differences when you're planning and delivering instruction. So you want to respect students' diverse perspectives and a diverse background, and you want to make sure that you implement that into your teaching methods where everyone feels welcome and that the cultures are welcome into the classroom, because we do want to make sure that we're supporting diverse learners, including students with disabilities. So they need to know that they belong there and that you are integrating their linguistic and their cultural differences in your instruction so they feel welcome and a part of the team. Ongoing professional development. Teachers, I know that a teacher's life is very busy, but you want to make sure that you stay up to date with the latest research, strategies, and techniques for working with diverse learners and students with disabilities. Continuous learning will help you refine your teaching over time. Teaching has evolved and children have evolved. So you want to make sure that you're current in your practices and that you're making a true connection with your students. So make sure that you have that ongoing professional development. And if you feel like you're not connecting, that you're talking to your leaders and working to identify those professional development opportunities that'll help support you in your teaching. And remember, every student is unique. So you just want to be prepared to adjust your strategies as you learn more about each student's needs and preferences and have that regular communication with parents. Create a communication plan for your parents so your parents know what you expect in your classroom and how you anticipate on communicating valuable information, because parents and teachers must work together because it truly does take a village. So you want to make sure that parents know which ways you're communicating, what methods you're going to have communication come throughout the year, and that parents know that they can talk to you about their child and make that village approach where you both parties merge together for the betterment of the child. For my leaders, you're going to be leading your schools, and you want to make sure that you're not only supporting parents, but you're supporting teachers of diverse learners, including students with disabilities. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that someone in your building is reviewing and updating those IEPs and making sure that you have those services started up for that student before that student enter your building. So you want to collaborate with your special education teachers, your parents, your related services providers to ensure that each student's unique needs and goals are addressed. You want to make sure that you push overall in your school an inclusive classroom environment and an inclusive classroom culture. You want to ensure that classrooms are physically and emotionally inclusive. You want to consider the layout of your school and the accessibility and the sensory needs of students with disabilities and diverse learners, and create a positive and accepting atmosphere where all students feel valued. And when I say this, you think about lunchtime. So where students with disabilities are going to sit during lunchtime and recess, and pushing into specials and things like that. You want to make sure that every part of your school building includes students with disabilities and diverse learners into the classroom, and that they feel valued, they feel welcome. They're not on one side of the school, far away from everything, or out in the portable but they have a place where they're in the school and they're actually infused and they're part of the culture. You want to provide those ongoing professional development opportunities for your teachers and staff to enhance their understanding of various disabilities and effective teaching strategies. This will foster a more inclusive learning environment as well. So you want to make sure that teachers have efficacy and they understand and they know how to actually implement those 504 plans, those IEPs, those diverse learner intervention plans, or whatever you have going on in school, that they know how to implement them, they understand them, and they can meet the students' needs with efficacy and confidence. You want to have a collaborative team approach. So you want to foster school-wide communication, but you want to make sure your teachers have an open communication too with parents and whoever's supporting that child. You want to make sure that parents have the open communication and they feel that they can come and be a part of the team collaboratively. You want to make sure your special education staff, your general education teachers, your therapists, and everyone are all connected and that there's a collaborative team approach to address challenges and share insights. You want to make sure that your teachers are differentiated instruction. So everyone is implementing instructional strategies that accommodate the various learning styles and abilities. And if your teachers don't know how to do that, then we need to get some professional development plan for that. Make sure teachers are using a variety of teaching methods, materials, and tools to engage all students effectively. If students are engaged, then behaviors will diminish because students are engaged. So you want to make sure that teachers have those skills and are able to provide that differentiated instruction for all of their students. The universal design for learning, make sure that we apply those UDO principles to lesson planning and provide multiple means of presentation, engagement, and expression to accommodate diverse needs and preferences. Leaders, in addition to that, you want to make sure we have that technology up to date. And not just technology, also assistive technology. You have technology infused throughout your school to support students' learning and communication needs. And then you train teachers and students on how to effectively use these tools. Technology is very heavy in the classroom and it's essential to classroom supports and success. Teachers are using technology and that they're trained and they understand how to leverage these tools to effectively teach and provide instruction for all students. Behavior is so important when you're starting school, and establishing those routines and foundations is very instrumental to success. Or whatever team that you have at your school that implement proactive, positive behavior support systems in the school system wide. So everyone is following the same rules, but then you also tailor those needs for those students who may need specific support with behaviors. Create sensory friendly classroom spaces or school-wide spaces to make sure that students have an area in your school that they needed to have sensory breaks, and consider sensory friendly lighting, quiet areas, and seating for students who may be overstimulated or need that time just to calm down and lessen their anxiety. Consider peer support programs. So you want to facilitate peer support programs, just like I mentioned for the teachers, that encourage students without disabilities or diverse learners to interact with those students with disabilities who are diverse learners so they can make the connections and learn from each other and create a more inclusive and accepting school culture. Offer social skills training and opportunities for students with disabilities and your diverse learners to interact with their peers in structured setting. Provide that social skills training and those opportunities in your school-wide to improve social interactions and relationships throughout your school building. Parent engagement. You want to make sure that you have open communication with your parents and they know how to communicate with the educators in your school or you as a school leader. You want to keep them informed about their child's progress, any challenges or change in curriculum or support services. It's very important that you keep parents engaged, allow them to have access to the school, and allow those opportunities for parents and school to build that partnership together. Transition activity for new grades and new schools, and develop a comprehensive transition plan that not only addresses academic, social, and emotional needs, but involve those relevant stakeholders in the planning process. Those back to school nights and those things to help families transition, and use your community resources to help support that transition and welcome parents in the building as students get acclimated to their new grade level, as teachers get acclimated back to school. And cultural sensitivity. You want to recognize and respect all cultural differences and how they intersect throughout your school. Be aware of diverse family backgrounds, students' disabilities, and their communication style as you communicate with your parents in your building, and you're making sure that you're culturally sensitive to their differences in their cultural differences and respect and recognize those things. Two more tips for you I want to bring up includes advocacy, making sure that everyone understands how to advocate for the rights and their needs of students with disabilities within the school and community and diverse learners. And you want to ensure that all students have access to the appropriate accommodations and supports. I say students with disabilities, but you want to also consider your diverse learners who may have English language learner plans or any type of intervention plans and supports. You want to make sure that the students and the teachers understand and that you as a leader are advocating for the rights of all students in your building and making sure that you're supporting those appropriate services and providing those resources for those students. And then remember, overall, you want to create an inclusive environment throughout the year. You're going to make adjustments along the way. You want your parents to be involved. You want your teachers to be involved. You want your parents and teachers to communicate and work well together. And you want to make sure that you've made adjustments in your buildings to best support the needs of diverse learners, including students with disabilities, English language learners. You want to regularly evaluate the effectiveness of your strategies and make adjustments throughout the year to best support the diverse needs of students with disabilities and diverse learners of students in your building. Remember, inclusive cultures and the boost of inclusive culture actually promote student achievement. When I did my dissertation, I learned that culture was directly linked to student achievement. I want to point out when I did my dissertation, one of my findings was that inclusive culture was directly linked to promote student achievement. So if students felt that their teachers believed in them and welcomed them into the classroom and the teacher expectations were high and that they were part of that culture, student achievement was boosted throughout the school culture. So you want to make sure that inclusive cultures are a part of your building practices every day because that does directly impact student achievement. So those are essential tips for parents, essential tips for educators, and essential tips for leaders as we get ready for back to school. Also, my final essential tip that I want to leave with my educators and my leaders is to purchase a copy of my book. You will not be disappointed. Essential Tips for Educators is a book, and in that book, I have 10 chapters in which I talk about all these things that I've just mentioned in this podcast. I provide the essentials of an individual education plan and break down the IEP. I break down the 504 plan and other resources. I talk about the home parent communication and just a lot of these tips that I pulled from today and spoke about today came straight from this book. So, leaders, if you want to gift your teachers with something wonderful for back to school, purchase a copy of Essential Tips for Educators for all the teachers in your building and give this is a great back to school resource and book for teachers to have on their shelf to refer to when they're working with students who are diverse learners. And for my leaders, you can purchase a copy of the Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders book, which is a great resource just for leaders in working with students who are diverse learners. Essential Tips for Educators, great resource. A lot of the information presented in this podcast came from here and from research. And then Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders is a great book for leaders. And if you want to give parents a resource, then refer Essential Tips for parents to use and use as a resource to help support their diverse learners. Our book excerpt for today is going to come from Essential Tips for Educators. And since I'm talking about back to school, I'm going to read a little bit of chapter 1, page 11, which talks about my first day of teaching ever, which was a long time ago. School started in August in Florida. So I began my preparation early by coming in over the summer to refresh my portable. I painted bookshelves, cleaned the room, and posted signs from the school supply store. I had a perfect looking class. I attended many professional development and faculty meetings at the beginning of the year. I was Janine Teagues. The open house came and only 3 parents attended. I was disappointed because I felt like this was a wonderful opportunity. I saw all of the cars in the parking lot, but only 3 parents were there to meet me. Feeling encouraged, I lingered and did some last minute cleaning to my class. The principal checked in on me and encouraged me and told me this would be a great year. The first day of school arrived. I was so excited and anxious to meet my new class. I had books and name tags on the desk. The students entered with new clothes and shoes, dressed to impress, and sized me up. The day started with the students being quiet and shy. After the first hour, the newness wore off. Remember, this was a sixth grade alternative education self contained classroom. So I had all of these students for 5 hours straight through, including lunch. I had a wise guy who felt the need to entertain the class and mock me as I went over the rules and procedures. Initially, I tried to ignore it, but the more I ignored it, the more the behavior escalated. After a while, the attention-seeking behavior became contagious, and I spent a lot of my day redirecting and correcting snide remarks and behavior. I did not sign up for ongoing disruptions. I was a teacher, and the students were supposed to listen the first time I made a request. I left work exhausted, frustrated, and defeated. On the first day of school, I learned there was more to teaching than a neat, organized class. My first day with those students, for the first 5 hours, taught me my perception versus my reality was highly flawed and a Nakia fairy tale. I left work with the quickly shifted mindset that I better get my teaching game on and figure this teaching thing out immediately. And that comes from Essential Tips for Educators, Chapter 1, my first day of teaching, and I had my perfect little classroom and thought I was going to teach. And I couldn't even get through the rules before I had to start correcting behaviors. And it was a real reality check for me as a teacher. I read pages 11 through 13. All of these books are available on Amazon, so feel free to grab you a copy of Essential Tip for Educators. And teachers, make sure you secure a copy of this book. Leaders, purchase a copy for your teachers. And leaders, also make sure you purchase a copy or look into a copy of Essential Tips for Special Education Leaders. And then I have Essential Tips for Parents as well, which talks about ways to support students with disabilities and diverse learners. Our words of wisdom for today: all students can learn and succeed, but not in the same way and not in the same day. And that was by William G. Spady. That is my word of wisdom for you today as we start our back to school and we get into the mindset of a new school year.
You've got mail.
Now it's time for our essential advice. Ask Dr. Nakia. I want to use this platform to support and spotlight fellow educators and families. If you have any questions or need any advice or want to share a great inspirational story that you want featured on this podcast, please feel free to email me at edufaithforall@gmail.com. That is EDUFAITH, the number 4, ALL@gmail.com. edufaithforall@gmail.com. I may read your letter or feature your story on this podcast. I look forward to hearing from you. This podcast is brought to you by Edufaith Educational Services. That is my consulting firm, and I provide services in the following areas: education consulting, including consulting for parents, educators, and leaders, college accommodation, advocacy support, consulting and training, parent educator trainings for districts and nonprofits and organizations, business and career coaching for families, business and district professional development training, particularly or specializing in services for students with disabilities, including interventions, MTSS, English speakers of other languages, education, leadership, and requested topics, program development. So if you have a program and you need support with your program or renovating a program of a service under IDEA Section 504 or any diverse learners, I can provide that training and support with program development, as well as feature my books. And finally, coaching for educators and leaders, because sometime in education, we need a little coaching and a little support to help us along our journey. If you are interested in any of those services, please feel free to email me or just simply check out my website at edufaithconsulting.com. That is www.edufaith consulting, one word.com. So check me out at Edufaith Consulting and see what Edufaith has to offer as we restore faith in education, one student at a time. I want to encourage everyone to get essential and follow me on social media. On Twitter, I am EdufaithS. On Instagram, I am Edufaith2021. On LinkedIn and Facebook, I am Edufaith Educational Services. And of course, on YouTube, Edufaith Essentials, which features the podcast, visuals, and all the links to all the podcast topics. And to my believers, be blessed. And to all others, be well, be kind, and be the change. Please feel free to listen to this podcast as it is featured on the Edufaith Essentials YouTube page and on all podcast platforms, including Pandora, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Amazon, Spotify. And follow me on social media. Once again, thank you for joining me for another episode of Edufaith Essentials, and have a wonderful day.